Keys to the Shop, episode 120, Social Media 101 with Jenn Chen. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFurio. I'm your host for the show. Always happy to have you along for these episodes. We're going to learn a lot today about social media and the ins and outs and rules and strategies that really make up a great online presence for a coffee company. We're talking with coffee marketing professional Jenn Chen. She does amazing work, and she is going to provide us with a lot of wisdom that is going to lay the foundation for a great online presence. So it's really going to be a great show. Now, this show would not be possible if it wasn't for the support of our great sponsors. I'd like to thank Prima Coffee for their support of Keys to the Shop. Prima is a specialty coffee equipment supplier, and they're based out of Louisville, Kentucky, right here where the show is based. And from the beginning of their company, they've set out to make the best coffee brewing equipment available to the general public and to professionals alike. Now, they have a real intense focus on curating the best equipment for every need, from grinders to espresso machines, under-counter refrigeration, brewers, hot water towers, you name it. You know, whatever you might need. If you're opening a new shop, if you're opening a second shop, if you just want to overhaul the equipment in your existing store, they have what you need at Prima Coffee. They put a big emphasis on having the expertise to help their customers get the right gear to fit every situation. So I would highly encourage you to go to prima-coffee.com. That's prima-coffee.com, and reach out to see how they can help outfit you with the right equipment for your needs. And again, my thanks to Prima for their support of the show. And also a big thank you to our sponsor, Pacific Foods. They're the folks behind the Pacific Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages, and those are designed specifically for the professional barista and the standards for excellence that they demand. So whether we're talking about their almond, soy, coconut, rice, or oat milk, its ability to take the heat from steaming, produce an unmatched, silky texture, and keep the flavor balance focused on coffee, that makes it a perfect choice for your cafe's menu. So Pacific is a huge supporter of specialty coffee in the barista community. And of course, these products were produced with the barista in mind, and they listen to and serve the needs of real specialty professionals. So I really encourage you, if you want to up your game when it comes to non-dairy offerings in your cafe, go to pacificfoods.com and learn more about the Barista Series line of non-dairy performance beverages and what they can do to really elevate what you offer your guests on your menu. So my thanks again to Pacific for their support of Keys to the Shop. Okay, so today we get to talk about social media. There is a lot to cover, and today we are going to spend just a few minutes with an expert talking about what are the most important things for you to know about social media. When you're in a coffee environment, when you're running an operation like a coffee bar or roastery or whatever, there's a lot of things to keep in mind. From the feel that you have in your shop to the feel that you give people on your Twitter account, your Instagram, your Facebook. Increasingly, the way that people know your brand and who you are as a company is by your online presence. And for a lot of people, social media can be an afterthought. It's not something that is focused on as much as it probably should be in this day and age. We all have experience doing it right and doing it wrong. And there are certain best practices for social media that will really help you stay on the straight and narrow when it comes to, having a positive and flourishing online presence that's consistent with your brand. And today, that is what we're going to be talking about. Best practices that will lay a foundation for a great online presence. And we are going to be talking with an expert in this. It's my pleasure to be welcoming to the show Jenn Chen. She is a San Francisco-based coffee marketer, and she uses compelling words and photography to make specialty coffee companies look stunning online. She advises specialty coffee businesses and organizations on digital marketing strategy, from voice to social media to how to complement a physical presence with a digital one. She believes in the power of creating inclusive digital and in-person communities and her work has appeared with industry leaders like Akaya, Swiss Water, and Sprudge. This is just a fantastic conversation with Jenn. We cover a whole range of topics and best practices, really, for great social media and online presence. Jenn talks to us about the importance of content and photography and how those things really need to be quality. We talk about engaging people online. What are the rules for engaging your customers or potential customers online, like your tone, timing, things like that. What are the big no-nos of social media? And when should you hire somebody to take over your social media accounts? Like, that's a big question. And then what about keeping everybody in the shop up to date with the things that are going on Twitter and Instagram for the company? Because sometimes those ships kind of pass in the night. And there's just a lot of things that we can tend to overlook when it comes to our social media presence. And Jenn really does a fantastic job in this interview with giving us the tools we need to succeed with social media in our coffee companies. So I know you're going to get a lot out of this conversation. I certainly did. And again, it's my honor to present this interview with coffee marketing professional Jenn Chen. Hi, Jenn. Welcome to the show. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Thank you. I'm super excited to talk about social media.
Yeah, me too. It's such a really important thing, and somehow it's one of the most overlooked things as well. I'm sure you have innumerable stories of ways that it's overlooked in spectacular fashion.
Yeah. Well, some people forget it's there, or they think that it's one of those things to check off, so they don't pay attention until they have to post. Or they just forget about it altogether, which can also be a big mistake.
So they just kind of fade out. Their online presence kind of fades out.
Yeah. And for a few companies, that could work. And for others, if your audience is really active on social media, it could just be to your detriment to avoid it.
Mm. I have a feeling like a lot of us who are in retail, have either been given the reins of social media in like a last-ditch effort. Like, I don't know what to do with this Twitter account. See if you can get us some more followers and, post some latte art. And so that afterthought, like we were just saying, and we're not really sure what to do with it. So we go to articles, we go to our best guess, and I want to start by talking about your philosophy on social media's role in a business, because for a lot of owners, it is one of those things that they kind of begrudgingly do, but it's way more important than just a task to check off.
Yeah, sure. So I have kind of a mixed philosophy on it. I think it will give back as much as you put in. I think there are also some pitfalls of people paying too much attention to social media. But for coffee companies specifically, I've definitely seen a lot more cafes and roasteries paying attention to it and posting more often. So it's been a little more competitive in that area where you'll see companies try and stand out from all the others. Like you mentioned before, latte art, like you see latte art all the time. And yes, a nice picture of latte art will get some likes and comments, but it will look like every other latte art photo out there. So you're not really doing much to separate yourself from other people on there. And I've also seen people design spaces in their cafes specifically for social media, or incorporate Instagram in mind when they're designing with light and table backgrounds and that kind of stuff. So it's been kind of interesting to see how social media plays into things.
The philosophy then is like you're going to, just like the service that you give people in the cafe, it's the same type of thing. Like you're serving people online something, and it may not be that you're having a transaction, but it's like you're offering them a taste of what it's like to kind of be in your cafe, more or less.
Yeah. So I think about it as an extension of your brand. So your experience on a company's social media should be very similar to what you experience in person if it's a cafe. or online if it's an e-commerce business. But I would also say don't go too far into it, because at the end of the day, you want people to go into your shop, have a great customer experience, have a good drink. And if your social media is too good, or you have a mismatch in personality or product quality, it's kind of false advertising too.
I love that you said that. We can edit things so heavily, right? And if you have this voice online that's just completely opposite of what your cafe is, I guess it just means you should have enough self-awareness to know what's consistent and what's not.
Yeah, and I kind of turn it to customer service. So if, for example, someone makes a complaint on Instagram and you respond to them really great there, but in person in a cafe, you wouldn't do that. That's kind of weird. Or if you have some sort of product question and you don't get the same experience as you would in a store, like you definitely want it to be an extension of your brand, not as like a totally different brand experience.
In your expectation, the customer's expectations are just, it seems like they are going to be built more online first than they are in the store, like especially when they're traveling to, larger cities and they say, I found you on Yelp, or I found you on, I don't know, I searched the hashtag on Instagram or something.
Yeah. So I think in that case, it might depend. So there are cafes in high foot traffic areas where they get a lot of new customers through there. There are also cafes that are in strip malls where they have to be a little more creative in their advertising, and maybe Yelp is the way to go. So it would depend on how people usually find you. And there are like Insta-famous cafes and drinks where people just go to get that drink, to take a photo of it, or because they saw it on Instagram and they have to go to that cafe to see it.
Yeah. So that's the same for restaurants too, right? Like we have this particular burger, what was that? The Cronut, in New York.
Right.
Yeah. And my gosh, what one of us would not want that kind of fame? I guess maybe it's a double-edged sword though. You get people coming in and they're not really there for you. They're there for the product and they don't come back.
Yeah, I don't know. I have like a weird opinion on these because I've definitely fallen into that trap where I go to a cafe to get this drink or food that I saw on Instagram. And I'm like, oh, this is so exciting. And I try it and it's really not that great.
Oh no.
It just looks pretty, but it doesn't taste good. And so I don't go back because it doesn't taste good. So that kind of just goes back to what I was talking about. Like you have to be able to back up your social media with quality. And if you don't have good quality to start with, then social media can't solve that problem for you.
Well, that's a perfect place for me to ask a question about content then. I mean, there's so many questions that people have about social media, and I think we're going to touch on some really top shelf ones in this conversation. The first one is what we just were talking about. You were mentioning quality in the cafe. And then, of course, we want to have quality online as well. So talk a little bit about the importance of like photography and content when it comes to your social media.
Sure. So content is everything from like your captions, your words, any graphics, photos, videos, live streams, that kind of stuff. And it takes a bit to plan that content, to have the skills to create different ones. And I think quality content is really important in managing social media. In general, it is more important than ever because so many people now have good content that it's now competing in the newsfeed on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram. All of them have turned to algorithmic timelines, where they favor content that's been interacted with. And so if you don't have good content to start with, or you don't have an engaged audience, then it's not going to get noticed at all.
Ooh. Is that why it's such a jumble in Twitter and Instagram, where it says like, here, you might have missed this, or remember this post or something? Is that how they order those things?
Yeah. So on Twitter, I actually use Tweetbot, which is a third-party client of Twitter, and they don't have the algorithmic timeline. It's just straight chronological, which is very nice. But the you might have missed it section is based on like people you've interacted with before, the types of tweets that you've liked, retweeted, clicked into, that kind of stuff that they think you might like. And that's the same for Instagram and Facebook too. The more you've interacted or enjoyed some sort of post, on Facebook it even goes down into post type. So if you liked a video, let's say for like brewing coffee from one company, and they post another one, then it's more likely to show you that video again. Okay.
So content in coming up with quality content, quote unquote, what does quality content mean? You mentioned the voice of your company. Is there more to it than that?
Yeah. So content quality, like for photography and videography, would be, it doesn't have to be professional, but the photos need to be in focus. Probably have some sort of filter on it, and actually be in line with your company. So I see a lot of superficial posts from coffee companies like, "Good morning, this is our morning coffee," or "We're taking an espresso break," but that's all they post. Or "Oh, this is our latte art." So it doesn't really do much to me as a follower to understand what that company is about.
Well, they could be trying to be like, yeah, we want you to get a feel for like the real life of the shop, and like this super authentic, to just be pretty underwhelming. But I mean, is there too much authenticity then?
I don't call that authenticity. I think that's just being maybe a little lazy, or you have someone who doesn't know much about coffee who's posting about it.
They're on a deadline. Post twice a day. I don't know what to post. Here's a coffee. Post
yeah,
that.
here's a cup of coffee. Here's another cup of coffee.
Let's have a feature of cups of coffee every day.
Well, Instagram account for that. I think it's like cups of coffee around the world or something like that. That one's kind of
stole the idea. So people taking pictures of coffee on their cell phones. I mean, like most people have some kind of a quality phone, or have access to a quality phone that can do that. You don't need like a high-end pro camera to do that stuff.
No, smartphones now some of them are better than a few cameras that are being sold. And I've definitely taken some great photos with just my iPhone in portrait mode. And there are a lot of free apps out there for filters. There are also free lessons on how to use your phone for photography. So I think some people could benefit from those lessons. In general, I see people who don't understand what good photography means, like what I said before, putting things in focus, or just like wiping off your lens on your phone so things aren't as blurry, like being able to construct a photo where like to make it interesting. So like when you as a follower when you're just scrolling through your feed, you see so much stuff. And you can get a good idea of like what catches your eye. And I would say pay attention to that, especially when it's coming from brands or people with high engagements. And that way you can see like maybe that's something you can try for your company. Does that make sense?
Oh, that makes perfect sense. You're really competing for eyeballs in that area, and it's like I'll be scrolling through and I'll be looking for specific things and I'll miss them, and even though I'm looking for them, just because my thumb is moving without me thinking about it.
Yeah, exactly. And there are a few companies out there, or a few accounts that can have both a great photo and good writing in their captions or posts. For example, Humans of New York is one of those really great examples of storytelling. They have a pretty noticeable style in portrait photography, and then in their captions, usually people don't like reading long posts, but their audience expects some sort of writing in there, and you read it. Like it's expected quality, so it's worth stopping every time you see a photo from them.
That's interesting. They made people expect that by doing it, which I imagine at first was unexpected.
Yeah.
So just being consistent over time, you say, well, to heck with it. This is who we are. This is our voice. We're going to do these things, but we're going to be consistent with it over time. Mm-hmm. You'll build your audience, I guess.
Yeah, and people know that they're going to get both a good photo and some sort of story behind it. And it's great. It's not really a brand per se where they're trying to make money, but it's an example of someone who uses social media in kind of an opposite way, because a lot of people recommend like short captions and that kind of stuff. But if you can put out good writing, or have some sort of voice that's entertaining to people, or emotion grabbing, then you can make it work for you. Long captions are great.
So you're interacting with people based on the quality of the photography, or getting their attention at least, and then mm-hmm. the content is, they are able to engage deeper with that. And that sort of engagement is what you hope for. And a lot of a social media manager's job has to do with engagement, which is probably, I would imagine, one of the harder aspects of having an online presence is how do you engage with people in a context where there is just this text and they're complaining about a drink, or even if it's positive, like they're praising you and you do or don't respond and you drop the ball in one of those two ways. So basically, what are the rules for engaging people online, like getting in those conversations, the back and forth, I guess both positively and negatively? Because I imagine the expectation is slightly different than their expectations would be in the cafe.
Oh, yeah. So the social part of social media is sometimes missed by companies. So if you manage any social accounts, you'll get people like responding to your posts, and they think, you might think that your only job is to post and respond to those comments to your posts. But another aspect of social media is also engaging with the people who are posting themselves. Whether that's them enjoying their cup of coffee, or maybe talking about some sort of news item that is relevant to your company. The biggest mistake in interacting, besides missing those posts, would be trying too hard to push for sales or brand exposure. No one really likes a hard sell. I don't know many people who do. And I've seen companies respond to some posts, be like, oh, and check out our website here. I'm like, I don't really want to now. Like maybe I was a good candidate as a customer, but I didn't know you. And that was the first thing you've ever talked to me about, was a hard sell.
That's awful.
Yeah. So instead, I think like engaging people on their posts, specifically just for that post, like maybe they're talking about enjoying some morning coffee. You can ask them what they were drinking lately or something like that. You don't have to say like, oh, and you should try our breakfast blend because that would go really well for your morning.
On sale now.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other part of engaging is customer service, because someone's eventually going to talk to you about whether they enjoyed their drink or their service or they didn't like it. Like, it happens. For that, I would say be prepared with some responses. And I'm a big fan of writing things down in plans. So for a company, I would recommend coming up with a bunch of scenarios, like most common things that people would talk to you about, like, oh, this coffee is great, or hey, this drink order was messed up and I'm really not happy about it, that kind of stuff. And then some acceptable responses to it, things that the social media manager is allowed to do. And that could be offering a free drink on their next visit, giving them a gift code, just saying, sorry, we'll try and make it up to you, that kind of stuff. And this is especially important if you have someone else that's not at the cafe or not the owner or in an agency managing your social media.
But they're kind of relying on a direct feed of your voice to help them, accurately represent your brand. So it's already separated from you by one factor. So it seems like that relationship really needs to be a tight relationship. And I mean, there's always those instances that you see online where you see these long arguments that people are having, and it's a brand, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this company is actually engaging with this customer in such a rude way. And it's like watching a dumpster fire. It's like, it's entertaining, but my gosh, like who set this thing? And I mean, obviously there's right and wrong ways to respond to complaints and tension that erupts online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of goes back to where I said I'm a fan of plans. Mm-hmm. So in those cases, I call it a crisis communication plan. So it's planning for whatever comes up. And it could be that it's something as small as someone not being super happy with their drink, or as large as, let's say, harassment happened at your company and you're getting a lot of flack for it. Having some sort of plan in place where you're sitting down with a clear head, having all this stuff written out, what the proper responses are, will be very useful when you're in the moment. And this is happening to you, because the people who are responding in negative ways or in kind of a way that a company probably shouldn't respond on social media are usually managed by the owners or someone really high up at the company who hasn't really experienced that before. And so they're in their emotions and they're giving that like knee-jerk emotional response and forgetting about how everything's public. If you delete it, it's still searchable. If you're a super high-profile brand, screenshots are there. Don't put something on the internet that you wouldn't want to see like 5 years later. And I mean, that goes for everyone, but having some sort of plan in place, I think it's very helpful. And it helps you kind of just calm down in your responses. For the most part, people just want to be heard. Everyone's been a customer before. You've probably tweeted at a company or like messaged a company about something that you weren't happy about, and you expected a response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see that happening a lot with airlines, especially.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've done that several times. Sometimes I try and go through DMs if they have like some sort of support channel, but in general, like everyone's gone through some sort of customer support on social media, and you know what it's like. So kind of just step into the customer's shoes when you're responding as a brand. I say move things into DMs when possible, especially if you have like potentially private things that you need to talk about, or if you're troubleshooting someone. No one really wants to see like that whole thread go on in public. But in general, respond. That's probably the biggest advice I can give. And if it's a troll, that's something else. But if it's someone who just wants to be heard, you can just have some sort of statement that acknowledges that you've heard them, you're thinking about it, or you can't do anything about it. Just something that shows that you're paying attention to them. And I have a study to reference here where they took a look at airlines and their response times and just them responding at all to tweets. So in general, responding will create greater brand value, and it also shows up in a monetary value. If an airline responded to a tweet without providing a resolution, they still got $2 more in brand value, and that would be applied to a future airline ticket. If they did resolve, like they responded and resolved it with a solution, people were willing to pay $6 more. And if they responded to a positive tweet, like they had a great experience with the airline, and the airline responded, it generated $28 for a future ticket.
Wow.
So all of those shows, like, just respond.
When you put it, when there's money on the line, at least, if that doesn't get your attention, my gosh, but it just makes sense. When you engage with somebody who's unhappy and you like make it better times 10 and actually like dedicate time beyond what is, when it's quote unquote fixed, and then you go above and beyond. I mean, that's just what you would do for somebody if you wanted to be known for stellar service in the cafe, right? Yeah,
exactly. And it'd be like, let's say like someone wanted you to make like steam some milk that they brought in. You wouldn't like say nothing to them at the counter.
Ignore them. Oh my gosh.
But you probably also wouldn't say yes. You would just say something along the lines of, hey, this is not something we can do. And that's the same online. Even if you can't provide a solution that they want, which would be steaming that milk, they still get a response and hopefully understand why they can't have that solution.
That's a great example. So now we're talking about things not to do. I wonder, there's obviously going to be more of things, but more generally speaking, like in social media, like absolutes, like black and white, do not do these things. Like, what are the big no-nos of social media?
Okay, so one would be using it like it's your personal social media. Right. Some people are given the reins of a company's account because they have experience on the network. So it's like, oh, you're on Twitter. Why don't you take over our Twitter account? And I'm sure we can all think of someone who's done this. And that's a problem because companies don't use Twitter or Facebook or Instagram like a person would. They're not going to be like, oh, this is what we're eating for lunch. And this is what I'm doing tonight, that kind of stuff. Instead, they have to think about who their audience is, which is probably very different from a personal account's audience, how they speak online, what they post, what networks they use, and how they're going to use all the different features. It's like a Facebook page for a company is not the same as a personal page, and you have to know the difference between the two, and you have to know how a Facebook page's posts would appear, because your like personal posts, your friends' posts are favored over a company's posts. And if you don't know that, then you're just going to be posting randomly with no plan, no consistency, and no quality, and you're going to be really frustrated by what you're doing. So that would be number one. Next is kind of going into the outsourcing part, where you either outsource someone to someone who you don't manage at all, so they're just running away with the company handle, or you're hiring someone who doesn't know anything about coffee, which I touched upon earlier.
Right. So
it definitely is noticeable when you hire to an agency who doesn't know anything about specialty coffee, especially if your brand is really niche. So for example, you can use like an importing company. If you don't know anything about importing, or you don't know anything about what origins you're sourcing from, or agricultural practices, or like what's happening on the ground for producers in certain countries, then it's going to look really superficial in your timeline. You're also not going to be able to respond to any sales inquiries or customer requests. It's just going to look really boring. And it makes you look bad too, because it's supposed to be an extension of your brand. And if it doesn't look like you know anything about specialty coffee and you want people to know more about specialty coffee, then that's a problem.
It feels like that's one of the ones that is most likely to be a decision of the owner where they hand it off. And as long as they're posting out there, it's a placeholder and it's fine. So back to that, like, look, this is maybe one of the main ways that people are going to know your brand. So don't just, lowball it and be that. As you're talking, I was thinking about what could they possibly say? Like, we scour the globe for the best beans. Okay, good.
Yeah. I don't know who posted it, and it just came up in my timeline of someone posting, especially a coffee company, posting a photo of coffee cherries, but it was a total mix of colors, like green next to red, next to yellow, and hands somewhere in there. Like that classic pose. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is a consequence of someone who doesn't know specialty coffee finding a stock photo and saying, oh, this is coffee. It looks great. It's colorful.
It's got all the colors in it. Isn't that great? That coffee is going to taste amazing.
Yeah. And can you imagine if that was posted by an importing company that says they're specialty grade? That doesn't look good.
Sure. I guess I see that a lot of times when you get notice of an acquisition of a company, and then the corporate brand takes over the social account like they do for all of their owned brands. And you're like, oh, the sparkle has kind of left this feed.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can tell when they switch social media managers, that's not good.
The soul's no longer in the body.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it.
So I wonder, like, since we're talking about it, there is a right way to go about hiring an agency or outsourcing your social media. And of course, there might be a wrong time. So when is the right time? Like, when should a company consider that outsourcing their social media is a good idea?
That is a really good question. So I wrote about this in a blog series for my own site because I kept getting that question. And my recommendation for coffee cafes and specialized companies is usually to keep it in-house. And whether that's having a barista who can learn how to use social media, or having someone part-time up to full-time, up to you, to manage social media, I think is better than outsourcing to an agency. That being said, if you have to outsource, then I would say go to someone who knows coffee or has some sort of experience in coffee, so they know the vocabulary and know what people want and talk about. And they have some sort of knowledge, so they can post, photos of coffee cherries that are all red instead of a mix of green and red. There's also a lot of different ways you can outsource your social media. You can do only photography outsourced, like all that content that we were talking about earlier. You can outsource only the management of it. So someone's just posting and responding to things. You can outsource marketing strategy, which is what I do. So someone will talk you through what you should do, how you should plan, what kind of content's good or bad, that kind of stuff. There's also just like the all-in-one, like you don't want to do anything with social media, which is okay, that's valid. And that would be a good sign too. Like when you hate it, or it's starting to become a chore, and taking up too much of your time, or you have better things that you can focus on, which is totally okay. If you're an owner and you suddenly think that you're doing too much time in accounting, for example, and you think accounting isn't your strength, and you've done that cost-benefit analysis and figured that hiring an accountant would be cheaper than doing it yourself. That's the same for social media.
So would it be a necessary step to outsource it when you don't have somebody willing to do it internally?
I don't know how often that would come into play. Like, usually people want to do something else, right? In a cafe or a roastery or some sort of setting, because you have like baristas on bar or people who are in different levels in a cafe. Like, you have lead baristas and shift managers and stuff like that. People usually want to learn new skills. And I would say if there was someone on bar who wanted to learn social media, it is a better investment to train them in that and get them to do maybe even like just start 5 hours a week on social media than to outsource, because they will know more of what's going on in the cafe than someone outside of the cafe would.
Mm-hmm. And you still need to, you have access to them too, to manage them and to communicate.
Exactly. Yeah. And the other benefit is that they get another skill on their resume. And skills are always great. But if you absolutely have to, like, no one wants to do it, you don't want to do it. Look for someone, like I said before, who has experience in specialty coffee, either as like a barista or something in food or related industry, and someone who could talk to you about the kind of content you want to post, how you want to be online. I think there are a lot of people who want to be social media managers of any company. Doesn't matter if it's coffee or not. That's great to be a generalist, but in specialty coffee, it's definitely beneficial when you've had experience in it and then you become a social media manager.
It seems so crucial. Like hiring, it's like when you're hiring somebody, you want to hire for, attitude and, like Nick Cho says, like hire for potential, and you can train the skills of coffee making just fine. Like you can hire this person because they absolutely know everything about your culture, but you could teach them how to use, buffer or whatever. Just fine.
Yeah. Hiring someone who has no coffee experience and then teaching them some vocabulary about coffee is not going to replace any bar experience. And so if a customer comes onto social media and is like, hey, can you steam this milk that I brought? How would you respond? Like, would you be like, oh yeah, totally, because you don't know.
The customer's always right.
Yeah. I kind of subscribe to the idea that the customer is not always right and education is necessary. And maybe that's something you would just have to train someone on if that is outsourced. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you outsource, you're not going to be their only client. So they will be paying attention to some other things, some other industries, maybe, other companies. And if you're paying them to only post and respond, then you're not going to get much in terms of the social part of social media. Like, they're not going to engage with other people.
To me, in my mind, it's like over half of what it makes social media so beautiful. Like getting recognized by the brand. Like, okay, I like eat maybe like 2 or 3 Lara bars a day, and I'm not ashamed of it. And I have tweeted to them, and they have liked my tweets. And I don't know, it's silly, but I'm like, hey, I'm glad that Lara, probably herself, the owner of the company, is liking my tweets. I'm kidding. But it's really cool. And I feel more of a connection there. And if you're outsourcing, then maybe they don't have, like you said, the time. Like, that's a really great point. Like in the crisis stuff, my gosh, if that's above their pay grade, then you're cooked.
Yeah, and there might be a time delay too. Like maybe they don't know how to respond to that milk thing, and they have to ask whoever their contact is at the shop of like, hey, can we do this? So you're losing a little time in that way too.
Yeah. Consistency is such a huge thing, and continuity between the two U's that are out there, the online U and the in-store U. Baristas are often the recipients of decisions made that kind of trickle down. They're like, oh, I've never seen this discount before. Like, where did that come from? And somebody had a brilliant and legitimately great idea that wasn't communicated, and what was supposed to be a happy occasion is now like a 5-minute line holdup. So I wonder if you could speak about like how the importance of communicating with staff in the shop about what happens online.
Oh, that's a great question. So this might be a two-part thing. One sounds like there might be some internal communication issues. And then the second is if you have a social media plan written out, you can just keep that public internally. So everyone knows, like, oh, you're going to post 3 times a day. You're going to respond to all these posts and comments. Someone is looking at the Yelp page and responding. This is how we respond to a happy customer. This is how we respond to an unhappy customer, what we can offer, that kind of stuff. I just lay it all out. And then talking about what you post on social media. So if you give a discount on social media, but you don't tell your baristas, that's a problem.
Big time.
Yep. And that is not only a social media problem. That's just like an internal issue. And maybe like a conversation for a totally different podcast episode.
Yeah, great idea. It deserves a lot of time for sure, but it is social media doesn't seem exempt from that dysfunction.
No. So I think internal communication is very important in social media. Your employees are going to be one of your biggest advocates for your business. So you have a new drink out. One of the things you could do is have some sort of internal press release being like, hey, we've got a new drink out. Here are some photos. Here are some like highlights of it. It's got these ingredients. We're going to serve it, I don't know, only on the weekend, that kind of stuff. And send it out to everyone with the expectation that they will read it. This is more going into your internal communications plans. And that way people will know how to communicate that out too. So like they're probably also really excited about this drink and they could use their own personal social media to post about it. So I think that's more of like a bigger picture thing. If you're not communicating with your baristas or your baristas are not excited about a new drink, you've got some bigger issues to worry about.
Oh, big. Yeah. I think there was an episode, a short like Thursday shift break episode, I think, about introducing chaos, where I talked about how owners and managers can do these things. They're like in the moment, hey, we're going to do this new thing, and then just drop it into the laps of people like, oh my gosh, like, what is this? Yeah,
that's not good either.
No. I mean, intentionality just seems like such a big theme here with social media, and not treating it like something that will just automatically draw people to you. And it's more dynamic than just getting followers and likes, but it's about that engagement, and it's just the culture reaching out into people's homes. It's actually a pretty intimate thing when you think about it.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that you can just talk to a company that's halfway around the world, or even a person. I've made so many industry connections just through social media, and I've only met them like 3 years later in person. But I feel like I know them so well. But our industry is kind of, I think, unique in that way, where we will happily help out someone we've never met, who's halfway around the world with something they need help with. Like, that's really cool. The power of social media.
Indeed.
Yeah. And I follow some cafes, like in different countries. And if I ever get to visit those countries, I would definitely go and visit those cafes just because I've been following them for so long.
Yeah. Excellent point. I'm really glad we got a chance to connect with you and learn more about this. No doubt this is really going to help some people. if people want to reach out to you and get some strategy for their social media, if they want to read your writings and things, how can they find out more about what you do?
You can go visit my site. It's jennchen.com, JENNCHEN.com. I have a blog there that I write about marketing in coffee, sometimes personal stuff. I also send out a free newsletter every 2 weeks filled with links on social media and coffee marketing, and then other interesting links that I like to read and share. And then you can also find me on social media. My handle is the THE and then my name, Jenn Chen. And that is Instagram and Twitter, my favorites. Also on Facebook if you have to.
Nice. So great to talk with you today. Thank you for taking the time to lay all this out for us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me onto the show. I've enjoyed it.
Well, I hope that was really informative for you and that the tools mentioned in this conversation are things that you can start putting into practice right away. Obviously, we all have policy manuals, or at least you should, I would say, of how to present yourself and your product, your space to the guest in your shop. And it really makes sense to build something similar for how you present yourself and your product, etc., to people online. Don't make it an afterthought. Take the things that Jenn has said in this interview and put them into practice to help you build with purpose that presence, the same way you would for a physical presence. There's a lot of wisdom here that Jenn has laid out that is just born from years of observing and consulting and seeing what works and what doesn't. So Jenn has given us some links to follow for further learning. There's the Airline Study talking about turning angry customers into loyal ones. She also gave me a link to an article on brands taking a stand online for different issues that come around in our culture. And then there's a link to an article that she wrote. It's a 3-part blog post series on when to outsource your social media. You can learn more about her services and connect with her at jennchen.com. That's JENNCHEN.com, and on social media at the Jenn Chen. So a big thank you to Jenn for joining us on the show and giving us some insight into the world of social media from your expertise. Really appreciate your work in the industry and also coming to spend time with us and helping us be better professionals and represent specialty coffee well online. That's really great. So thank you so much, Jenn. If you want the show notes to this episode, you can go to keystotheshop.com. On the sidebar, there's a place for you to enter your email address. Once you submit that, you will be signed up to receive show notes into your inbox on a regular basis. That's going to be really valuable because episodes like this, where we present tools to help you do better in business, are going to be there in just easy to read format. You don't have to think about writing things down as you listen. The main points and takeaways from the episode are already put into a succinct format, and the links are also there as well. So go to keystotheshop.com, sign up for that. If you want to reach out to me directly, you can do so by emailing chris@keystotheshop.com. I would absolutely love to hear from you if you want to talk about coffee, if you have questions or comments and feedback. I want to hear about it. And you can also email me if you want to explore what it's like to work with Keys to the Shop consulting and training. If you're in a place where you want some training for your baristas or your managers, if you want to level up the operations in your cafe, you're opening a coffee bar and you need somebody to be by your side to help you, get all of the ducks in a row, or you want to straighten something out that's gone awry in your cafe, that's where Keys to the Shop can really help you. So chris@keystotheshop.com. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about it. How can I help you in your business, in your career? We can set up a free exploratory call, talk about what you need and how I can help. So thanks everybody for joining me on the show. I really appreciate you listening to the show. If you think about it, share these with a friend, subscribe to the podcast, rate and review this on iTunes, get the word out about Keys to the Shop. There's such a deep and rich well of information and expertise on this show that really I would love to see spread across the industry more and more. And you're sharing these episodes in this show, subscribing to the show, and rating and reviewing it all help get the word out about these great industry best practices that truly make a difference in the success of specialty coffee as a whole. So thank you for that. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.